Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Anne Marie Burton. I'm the Vice President of Programs at the Foundation. I am here to take literally 1 minute to introduce our fearless leader, Mr. David Hinson. Mr. Hinson joined the foundation not a long time ago, but he's a champion for economic empowerment for Black and Brown communities. He is a former executive of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, where he helped to develop their Institute for Diversity and Emerging Businesses. He also led and restructured the U.S. Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency, raising $19 million in capital and contracts from minority-owned business firms during the Obama administration. We are thrilled to have Mr. Hinson leading our team at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. And without much ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Hinson.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I'm not one on correcting people, but Anne Marie said I raised 19 million of capital and contracts. It's actually 19 billion. And I happen to have the wonderful occasion in college to go to Howard University. And yes, and one of the things that was so unique about my experiences at Howard was if there was a seat close to the front, there was always a sister taking that seat. So for those in the back, there's a whole lot of seats. If you want to relive your college days, there's a whole lot of seats up here, and I would encourage you to come up and take these seats up here. We're all a family, so let's feel close together. Again, I want to say good evening and welcome to the Congressional Black Caucus Annual Legislative Conference, the Sojourner Truth Project Town Hall Meeting. On this day, on September 11th, a mere 18 years ago, our nation endured one of the worst terrorist attacks in our history. And so I want to take a moment and recognize those Americans who died during that day and the families who lost loved ones during one of our nation's darkest hours. I also would like to join the many voices who are speaking loudly about the plight of our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas, where 50 people lost their lives as a result of the devastation of Hurricane Dorian. ALC co-chair, Representative Frederica Wilson, grew up in one of the areas that was destroyed by Hurricane Dorian. And this morning she spoke passionately about the importance of all of us, working together, joining together to support our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas during their time of need. And so I want to personally encourage you to reach into your pockets, to reach into your hearts as you see fit and as you are moved, to support those folks during a time when they need our support the most. So I ask you to give what you can and to do what you can for the people of the Bahamas. As Anne Marie mentioned, I recently took the role of President and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I accepted this challenge with a very sober mind about what it means to be here in this role at this particular point in history. This period forces us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves if we're going to sit on the sidelines and be angry or just complain, or are we going to get involved and be a part of the solution? Your presence here today at ALC 2019 in many respects answers that question. So with this in mind, I figured that it was a good time to come into a room full of intelligent, savvy, focused, beautiful Black women who are here to serve and who have heard the call of leadership. And so as my minister used to say, it feels good to be in the house of sisters. For more than 4 decades, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation has been at the epicenter of policy development for the Black community, defining the global Black agenda. We advance this agenda by informing policy, educating the public, and developing the next generation of leaders. We are continuously building the pipeline for the next generation of Black leaders, which we know from our history that this nation needs us to ensure that it lives up to the ideals and its full potential. The CBCF will always recognize the importance of Black women leadership, and our investments in women leaders have paid off handsomely. It was a Black woman from our Capitol Hill internship program who made history for the foundation this year. This year, for the first time in history, a former CBCF intern was elected as a member of Congress. This woman, Representative Lauren Underwood from the state of Illinois, got her start interning with a young man who many of you have come to know and love. His name was Senator Barack Obama, but now we call him our former president and an important leader of our community. Well, some people say current president, so we're not going to talk political, but I'll take that. But certainly someone who continues to be a passionate leader within our community, supporting issues of women. And again, you can't say enough about the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, for the work she's done around this country to give voice to the people in this room. It is women who are leading the way in expanding thought leadership on Capitol Hill through our Capitol Hill Fellows program, where they specialize in everything from healthcare to water management. I mean, that's right. We have a fellow who's a specialist in water. Who would have thought? And I think that as we move ahead, we will also see women do something that is so critical to this nation. Many of you have seen the statistics, and most of you know that it will be Black women who actually elect the next president of the United States. So your job is far from done. The work that you have to do is necessary for us to maintain and grow our position in this nation. I thank you for being here at ALC, in this room, at this moment. I also thank you because I know you will be there when you are called to get the most important things done for our communities, for our nation, and for the Black global community. Now I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge a critical component of this mission, the contributions of our corporate sponsors and partners. Today's gathering would not be possible without the generous support. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Ooh, that is bad. For our generous support of Prudential Financial, which has supported this project and this movement since the beginning. I'd like to acknowledge our media partner, Essence, for their support of this conference and for the way they have uplifted Black women and girls through their publications and their events. Please join me in thanking all of our sponsors. And now I'd like to welcome a very special person, Prudential's Vice President for Corporate Giving, Shawnee Harris, to share a few words for us. Thank you again for your time, and thank you for coming today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, David. Again, my name is Shawnee Harris, and I lead corporate social responsibility at Prudential, and I'm also president of the Prudential Foundation. And on behalf of everyone at Prudential, we are pleased to serve as the presenting sponsor of this year's Sojourner Truth Legacy Project Town Hall. And I'm personally excited about the theme of today's discussion, Bridging Pathways for Black Women in Leadership and Politics. This is an interesting time to be a woman of color in leadership, both in the private and public sectors. A century ago, women made up only 21% of the U.S. workforce. Today, we account for nearly half of all U.S. workers. We also see more women serving on the boards of Fortune 500 companies and as presidents of universities than ever before. However, we want to see those numbers translate into more women and women of color in the C-suite, especially as CEO, since today there is only one woman of color serving as a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. But while large corporations may be struggling to translate recent gains into wins and women of color are having a moment in politics. As many of you know, there are 15% more women in Congress than there were the last session. Yes, that deserves an applause. And of the 127 women serving in the 116th U.S. Congress, 37% are women of color. Women of color are consistently being acknowledged as a key voting group and a growing force in the American electorate. And we are poised to continue to make history as leaders in 2020 and beyond. This is inspiring and empowering, and it's about time. The Sojourner Truth Legacy Project has helped drive the surge of women running for office and continues to energize women of color across the country to get involved. As a sponsor of the project for the last 10 years, all of us at Prudential are proud to support this work and that of the Congressional Black Caucus. We understand the importance of advancing more women, particularly women of color, as leaders in government, business, and across society. That advancement becomes an indicator of increased equity in all aspects of society. Perhaps now more than ever, our country needs the diverse perspectives as well as the compassion, determination, and wisdom that we bring as leaders. So I am delighted to be here today to encourage even more women to step up from behind the scenes and lead, especially as we celebrate the power of women of color and our unique talents and perspectives. Today's panel discussions will examine a variety of issues impacting our community. I'm impressed by the lineup of women here today, all of whom are leading the charge to help address some of the most challenging subjects of our time. So thank you again today, and enjoy today's discussion.
Are you ready to get going? Yes. Okay. I want to bring up Monique Presley. Monique, here? No? Monique Presley? Who's our moderator? Please give her a warm round of applause. See, you have to understand something about Monique. Monique is not always Monique. I think that Monique by day, there may be a different Monique, who knows, but she's doing a great job, and we're happy to have her as our moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having me. Hey, everybody. Hey. How y'all doing? Woo! Shake the cobwebs off, y'all. This is a room full of black women talking about what black women do, so that ought to be kind of exciting, right? Yeah? Can we just give ourselves a hand? Can we give ourselves a hand? When I was asked to do this, it was something I jumped at the opportunity to do because I know, because my mama raised me right and her mama raised her right, that any good thing that has happened in the world came through a black woman. Am I right? So I'm talking from the beginning of creation through Sojourner Truth, through all of these beautiful women you're going to meet today and up till current day. Any good thing, creation forward, is us, y'all. So the questions I'm going to be asking today are about why, if that's the case, we still get paid less than everybody else. Why, since everything happens on our backs, when it comes time for some demands to be made in the political process, we seem to be the last one that gets checked. Why is it? Since we are everything that you know we are, because I see a whole bunch of people out here that look just like me, why do we have to fight to be heard when, as you've already heard today, a president of the United States can't get elected without us? So what we're going to do, and you're going to hear from some women, I'm going to get out of their way. This is my only shot at it, so that's why I'm talking so fast. I want to know what's going to happen from this day forward that's going to change the game, that's going to shift the paradigm such that when we walk in the room, they understand, you better hear me and hear me good, or I'm walking out with my money, with my vote, with my power, with my creativity, with my business, with my innovation. So now we're going to talk about those things. I feel so much better having that off of my chest. All right, let's get ready for our panel. I'm really pleased to be bringing you some women who I know and whose work I know, even if I don't know them personally. And we're going to be talking now, about the force of Black women in the political process and in the United States. So the first person that we're introducing in our next phase, we got two panels, but we're going to deal with the ones we have right now. Dr. E. Faye Williams. She's national chair at the National Congress.
President.
Oh, excuse me, she's president.
Thank you.
At the National Congress of Black Women.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Williams.
Thank you.
Join me in welcoming Ms. Tamika Danielle Mallory, social justice leader, advocate, activist. Welcome, Ms. Mayor. Next, our original troublemaker, Ms. Tiffany Lofton, director of the NAACP Youth and College Division.
Janice. Hi, I didn't see you.
Welcome, Ms. Lofton. And finally, last but not least, we have my fellow ESQ, Ms. Ifeoma ESQ. We will call her Iffy from here on because she says that's what she likes. She is equity strategist at Think Rubik's.
Wow, I didn't know he was equity strategist. So smart.
Now, if I had the time, I would tell you reams and reams about what each of these women have done in order to make it worthwhile for us to hear from them today. But I trust and believe that because you know these organizations and you know these faces and you know of their work, that you're going to credit the beautiful people who arranged the Sojourner Truth Project, bringing them here today, and lend your ears to the things that they're going to be saying to us. They're each going to have a few minutes to talk about what is going on currently with them in their work, and then after that we're going to take some audience questions. So I want to turn first, because I know Dr. Williams is pressed, and if Dr. Williams has to scoot on out at some point, it is because she's running a whole other separate world and an event of her own on this very night. So we want to thank her especially for coming, and we'll know when she does that church one finger up that it means she could stay no longer. So Dr. Williams.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Well, we in the National Congress of Black Women enjoy doing many things. We are a service organization, And as you know, it was just 10 years ago about this time that we brought truth to the Capitol. We're the organization that brought Sojourner Truth to the Capitol, making her the first black woman there. We were told it couldn't be done. We tried to collect $1 for truth. We didn't quite make it. We had to finally go to some others to raise the money to do it. But guess what? It happened right on time, because as soon as we were ready to put Sojourner in the Capitol, Barack Obama was elected. Michelle Obama became our first lady, and it was she who unveiled the statue for us, and we're so proud of the fact that that did happen. Now, I come from a long line of black women who are achievers. First of all, one of my predecessors is Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, and on Sunday, we will be remembering her, and we are honoring her at our own brunch on Sunday morning. And that's one of the things I like to challenge all of us to do, is to tell our sisters' stories as we tell ours. Because if we don't tell those stories, somebody else is going to tell them, and they're not going to be the right story. So we have to lift each other up. Dr. Dorothy Irene Height, who is another one of my mentors, said, you know, we black women don't always do what we want to do, but we always do what we have to do.
That's right.
And in the Congress of Black Women, we, of course, are holding a session on the census on Saturday. We are all, because we know how important the census is to our getting funds for our communities. We're also holding a session on health, on mental health, you know, because sometimes as black women, we think we can do it all and we don't need any help, and sometimes we don't call on our psychologists and our psychiatrists even when we need to have that help from them. We have 2 black women from the Ohio State, as it is now called, who have developed something called learning and doing, but it's about our feeling, you know, to the freedom to be able to discuss our health. And so they are calling it specifically healing the wounds of circumstance. All of us have circumstances from which we have been wounded. And so we're doing that on Saturday. And we have invited everybody to come out and to listen to these 2 sisters. For those of you who listen to WPFW FM radio, you know that I do a program on Wednesday, and we talk about all kinds of issues. But you know what I do, and I think we all have to do that, is involve each other, bring each other into what we're doing, and you're always welcome to come on my show and talk about important things in our community. My friend Dick Gregory died about 2 years ago, about this time. But one of the things that he left with us is that the 2 most powerful forces in the world are the black church and the black woman. We are black women. We must understand our power. Thank you, and God bless you.
Just a quick follow-up, Dr. Williams. How can people who want to support the National Congress of Black Women do so?
Oh, that's easy. I thought you were going to ask us hard questions.
Oh, they're coming.
Yes. We, in the National Congress of Black Women, have a website, nationalcongressbw.org. The B stands for black, and of course the W for women. nationalcongressbw.org. And I tell people that I return every call. It may be midnight, 2 in the morning, whatever. But I return every call that I get on 202-678-6788.
I'm not doing that. I do it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Please make a point of supporting the National Congress of Black Women and all of the work that they do. Ms. Iffy ESQ.
Oh, I'm next. Oh, so that was so polite, and I don't know if I'm going to be as polite. Is that okay? Because I was asked to actually focus on the radical agenda in 2020. So everyone loves radicals, right, when they're older, which is also to say most radicals die young. And this is also why being radical is a dangerous and scary way of being. So I want to center a couple quotes from a radical that we all love now, Angela Davis.
All right.
The first quote of hers is, "Radical simply means grasping at the root." The second is, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time." We love her now, but to be clear, these were not popular beliefs when Ms. Davis was speaking out against the very institutions we are still fighting today. Which is a reminder that being radical isn't always popular. Being radical doesn't automatically get support even within the Black community. Being radical is very intentional, is about choices, and is about transformation, not reform. Just like equity is a necessary path to equality, reform at times may be a necessary path to transformation, but it is not and cannot be our only goal. Therefore, we have to ask ourselves during elections, during policy fights, during debates, do we want reform or do we want revolution? So I want to root my brief remarks on what ingredients are necessary to build a radical agenda for Black people. One intended to transform the relationship between Black lives and this land and globally. To do so would require a renewing of the mind, one that sees dreaming as practical, one that sees imagination and the exact hope which we must fight towards. I propose that a radical, transformational, intentional agenda requires a multi-tiered approach that is doable once aligned. The first tier is identifying clearly what needs to be transformed from cradle to grave, and strategically connecting policy and a call to action, empowering everyone who identifies as Black as being actors in such transformation. For example, if we are trying to transform Black maternal deaths, focusing on just birthing is too late. We must investigate what it means when we connect our young girls to OBGYNs at ages 12, 13, and 14, especially when we have data that states doctors still treat Black women differently than other women, believing we feel pain less than white women. This is important because it speaks to how professional services program us early to not advocate for our bodies when the root cause of maltreatment of the medical field is linked to the nightmarish experiments of J. Marion Sims, the first president of the American Medical Association, on the bodies of enslaved Black women. How can we transform this reality? We must investigate what it means when Black trans women are killed and no one marches. Why is that? Do we believe they deserve to live? Do we believe they deserve to die? What is the root cause of our silence? And what radical agenda would be needed to both question and resolve that? We must investigate why Flint, Baltimore, and Newark's water supply can be compromised, at what human rights advocates miss, and why human rights advocates miss our humanity. Do we not deserve clean water? Do we not deserve clean air? Do we have a right to live? So a radical agenda would require a root cause analysis framework that seeks to transform not only the ways institutions impact our lives, but our understanding of how it impacts our lives and how we activate ourselves much earlier than elections and legislative processes. So quickly, the final 2 points are what else needs to be transformed? How we view power. So let me ask this question. Do we really trust Black people? And how do we know? Do we really trust Black women?
Yeah.
How can we tell? Do we really trust Black youth? When have you supported them? Do you trust the poor? When have you stepped back and let them lead? We have to challenge who is a transformer, because transformers already exist. Big Mama is a transformer every Sunday. Barbers and hair braiders are transformers every day. I mean, I know mine transform me. If we are the sum of our parts, how are we empowering the parts of our communities that always get the short end of the stick, even from our own Black people? So the final part is, how are we documenting our radical moves? And this is somewhat controversial because if we're honest with ourselves, we all were not supportive of the young people in Ferguson. We all were not supportive of individuals like Tamika Mallory, who had to take the brunt end of things that we won't even talk about when it came to the Women's March. We all weren't supportive of the movement for Black lives, but without the movement for Black lives, we would not have presidential candidates talking about reparations today. So we are actually about to lose the radical history that we already have, and we continue to come year after year talking about how can we create a radical agenda. And all I offer to you is that to create the radical agenda, we must accept that we are born political, that our survival is the war, and transformation is the intentional state of being if liberation is the goal. So it is possible to radically transform this world, but as Ms. Angela Davis said, we have to commit to it all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Iffy. First, how can they find you, follow you, support you?
You can go to, our site is thinkrubix.com. We are a social impact firm, so thinkrubix.com. You can reach me at ifeoma, IFEOMA, at thinkrubix.com. It's weird when you're spelling your own name, right? It's like, I didn't even know how to spell my name.
Okay, and second, before I go to Ms. Lofton, how many of you all are young enough or woke enough in the room to know if you're not tweeting about it and posting about it, it's not even happening these days. So I'm not on my phone to know if people are already doing the right thing, but let people know we're in here. If you hear something good, tweet it out. Take a picture and post on Instagram. The hashtag for CBC ALC is hashtag CBCFALC19. That's hashtag CBCFALC19. Tell them that you are here in the Sojourner Truth Town Hall and holla back. Let us know what you think, or ask a question at anybody while they're up here, and we'll see if they can have time for it before they sit down. Ms. Lofton.
Thank you so much, Monique. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Oh, I'm about to say, I know y'all didn't go to sleep after Iffy. That was. My name is Tiffany Dina Lofton, newly known on Instagram as Ama Ajewa Kodie. Thank you. Since I just came back from my first trip to Africa for the year of the return. If you have not been, you need to go. I'm the national director for, shout out to all the Africans in the room who's about to clap. Okay.
Everybody.
Everybody needs to clap, and nobody did. You saw that? I know. So I'm the national director for the Youth and College Division at the NAACP. As of last year in February, I want to shout out all my NAACPers in the room who are here. We got some over there too. We got to grab them. And I want to talk from a perspective about not just young people, which we all talk about often, but more so relational organizing and what real strategic organizing looks like in the day and age where everything is digital. And in the day and age where everything is theoretical. Folks are picking and choosing sides based off of what they see somebody else say, rather than connecting that to their own experience, what their own true lived experience is, how they understand the research that they do, and not just what somebody presents online, and then how we take that and make it real on a day-to-day level for every single person, for them to use it as tools when they're on campus, in the community, at the dinner table, and especially at the workplace. Because another thing I want to talk about with young folks is the retention and the progressive, I'm using my quotations here, movement and the rotation of young people and the treatment especially of young black women in the progressive movement in the work that we do. Because as Monique stated in her opening, if everybody understands that black women are always correct, that everything great comes from us, that we are the ones who are most important, not only when it comes to democracy and civic engagement, but also to everything like education, labor unions, when it comes to fashion, when it comes to people being in music videos, when it comes to culture, all of those things. Yep, I did it before you did it. Shout out to Tamika being in the Rhapsody music video. I want us to take seriously, right, the opportunity when we talk about black women and young black women who are coming through the work, right? Not just the presentation, but the work. The people who are coming through the work don't get treated the same.
Come on.
The values don't align with the work that we do always, right? And I'm going to flag this so that Monique can ask the question later. Even our brothers sometimes are becoming a little bit of a problem, right, in the work that we do. And so we have to have some of those conversations. We talk about relational organizing. For those who aren't familiar, the NAACP Youth and College Division by itself has 339 chapters in good standing. So I would tell you we had 12,000, but that's on paper.
Right.
We have 339 that are in good standing. To be in good standing, you have to have 25 registered members or more. You have to have paid your annual dues, and you have to have your assessment for your year. And they have done all of those things. And so we have 339 chapters across the country that range from elementary school, middle school, high school, and college, who, since I've been here, And since the team has literally quadrupled, because I've been able to fundraise my butt off since I've been here, we've quadrupled our staff team. We just launched on our website a new position for field organizer. So any young person looking for a national organizing job, please go to naacp.org. We take seriously what it means over the last year to engage our young folks on what it is that they care about, what it is that matters to them, not what's popular. So if my young people on their campuses care about the white fraternity at Florida International University hanging a noose at their school, if they care about students in Minnesota who the media is not talking about, and there are students who are still hosting immigrant Mexican parties at the campus, and the university is doing nothing about it, and that's what my students and my young folks are talking about, then that's what we're engaging in. And it's 2019.
Right.
It's 2019. And there are students that are still dealing with trauma and race attacks and hate crimes that are not being dealt with on the local level. Outside of that, it costs too damn much to go to school.
Right.
Our parents don't have that space. They don't have the resources. They don't have the money. So that's another layer of the work that they have to worry about while they're sitting in the classroom. There's also when they graduate student debt. There's also when they graduate, what job are they going to take? And it is a choice. It has become a choice. When I was in school, and our students are finding this more now, that you have to choose whether or not you're going to be an organizer and you're going to stick to your passion and your work that you want to do, or whether you're going to get a real job.
Right.
And those two things are not separate. And when they get to DC, or when they find a nonprofit organization, or when they go work when they go work for the Congress, or they go work for the Hill in politics, they find that the realities of the values that they hold and the work that they want to do don't always match with the job that they're presented with. We don't get paid enough. We ain't treated right. People disrespect us.
Yeah.
We get comments that we should not be getting that nobody checks.
Right.
Ain't no allies in the room who have our back. It is a traumatizing experience not only to wake up and look at your social media to somebody who has been kicked by a police officer, but it's also traumatizing to take that experience in the morning. Brush your teeth, get dressed, be cute. Take the bus, drive your car, or walk to work. And then get another traumatizing experience while you're at the workplace, right? And then have to deal with that as a person who's supposed to be fighting it on the national level in the social justice work.
Right.
And our students deal with that often on the ground.
Right.
So our job at the national level in the Youth and College Division, to close, is that we're bringing back relational organizing. It doesn't mean that you're asking people, to do what it is that you want them to do. It doesn't mean that you're inviting them to a conference or a meeting, or you're inviting to a rally, and then that's the end of the follow-through. We're building with people with what are their talents, what do they care about, what are their experiences, who do they know, what do they enjoy, and then connecting those talents and experiences to the work that they want to do. Like last year when we worked on, in the fall, our Tennessee State Conference Youth and College Division, they worked on freeing Centoya Brown and getting her clemency. When we talked about registering students last year and doing voter registration on campuses, and not only doing voter registration, but specifically GOTV, so that they can organize their own panels at the schools when nobody else in the media wanted to talk about it. It's not enough to invite people and celebrities to come to your school. You have to move past that and say, how are we going to follow through with the work? And we're teaching our young folks how to do that. And then when they move from off campus, they're in the community. So they're helping to focus on what's happening in Flint, Michigan, and Detroit. They're focused on what's happening when mothers need to be bailed out. Shout out to all the black women who are leading the initiative to bail out black mothers on Mother's Day and throughout the year. And we did 12 of them with coalition folks here in the DMV area this past Mother's Day. So we're connecting that to our students, which, let me just end by saying this, it is a huge culture shift in the NAACP. They're not used to that. But there is a restructure that is happening. I've brought in a phenomenal team of leaders who come from amazing organizing experiences and backgrounds, and we're pushing and shaping not only the culture of black people, but the NAACP in of itself. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. They can follow me at, I know you're going to do it. They can follow us at Instagram, NAACP_YC. And we have a panel actually with Angela Rye, President Derek Johnson, our chairman Leon Russell, and the squad from Congress. Right after this panel, you can walk with me over there.
Yes, and what's your Twittergram?
My Twitter and my Instagram is just my full American birth name, Tiffany D. Lofton, and it's Loftin, not O-N.
Thank you, Ms. Lofton.
Thank you, Ms. Monique.
Ms. Mallory.
These two are like probably the most brilliant young folks. And are you a young folk? You are, right? Well, we old. You know we old.
She knows that. She knows she's
I didn't know I was older than you, Iffy. But anyway, they're absolutely brilliant. And so for me to have to talk after them is unfair. But what I am going to do, I'm going to talk about myself just a little bit, but I'm going to talk about Ife Williams a lot and just say that I think we need to pay homage to this woman sitting here who has made history over and over and over again and has spent such a great deal of her life also but uplifting young Black women and helping us get into positions of leadership. One of the first awards I received was from Ife Williams. So I just wanted to just give you your flowers while you are here, which will be forever because she's going to be here forever. And just make sure if you see her that you encourage her and give her love because she's always giving it to us. So I'm not going to talk as long as them because they have big mouths and they talk too much, no. But I think Iffy kind of led me in the direction that I wanted to go in, which is talking about radical change. And I'm a rebel rouser. I'm like, people don't want to be my friend, and I'm cool with that. I understand that my role is to agitate, and that it's not going to feel comfortable to most people around me. But I also understand that the work that I'm doing is, first of all, the calling that's just on me. Because even when I try not to say anything, I literally put my hands under here, close my mouth and my eyes, and I said, don't talk. The next thing you know, we're getting kicked out of the Democratic debate. Like that's just the way it happens. A totally unplanned situation. But the courage that it takes to be able to do that, I recognize that everyone doesn't either have it or even want to deal with it. But there is room, there is space for agitators. And I think that is really the thing that bridges the work and bridges all of the organizations that's doing great work, but in a lot of ways, and again, as you said, I'm not as nice. So, maybe I'll ruffle some feathers, but it's true. We have a lot of safe organizations. They do safe work, they speak safely, and when you take money from certain individuals, your voice is automatically going to shift and be semi-controlled by where the money is coming from. Right. And so that's just something that we know. We've seen it play out over and over again. And I'm sure people, even while they're taking certain money, they're still being as radical as they can be. They're saying a lot of things that they want to say, and they're doing the work. I'm not saying that people are 100% compromised, but I do know that when you are worried about how you're going to get your next check and make sure you pay payroll and insurance and all the things that go into running major organizations, and understanding that our people don't always do what they need to do to help ensure that you keep an independent voice. It's very difficult in the middle of a crazy storm or something happens in our community. We can raise money quickly from folks, millions of dollars, because people want to give. They want to give to a particular moment. But I'm not sure, well, I know for sure that we have to work on the sustainable giving. The sustainable giving that helps to ensure that these organizations and individuals and that Black media and all of these different entities that help to inform our people, that they are able to keep going every single day with an independent voice, or a voice that is only beholden to you, the people. And so that's something that has to be shifted in order for us to be able to do the type of work that we're doing. But even under all of that, what I have decided, and working along with my son, who's here, and Linda Sarsour, who is the Palestinian Muslim black woman brown woman, but I tell her all the time, Palestine is in Africa, whether y'all want to deal with that or not, y'all are African, and she's with it though. But and other folks, Angelo Pinto, who's an attorney that works with me, we have decided that we're going to bet on our people. We're going to bet on our people. We're going to bet on our people funding us. We're going to bet on our people supporting us, and bet on the people helping to keep the work going, so that we can turn down certain checks to be the voice that some of us need. So the way in which we see ourselves being sort of in that middle space is that folks can call us and say, hey, I can't do or say X, Y, Z, but I know that you all can. And so, come and make noise on this particular issue, or say the things that we need you to say. And we've done it for a number of people. That we have to, right? That's right. We have to have that middle ground. Somebody's got to be able to play that role. And so that's the role that I've taken on. It's not always easy. You can't always, think straight, because you don't know, from day to day, whether or not a check is coming. You are not always 100% sure that people will ever talk to you again. All those things that make you feel butterflies in your stomach. But I know that it's a job that if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And also young folks and just people in general who are tired of business as usual are looking for a space that they can get into to be able to say what others won't say, to be able to organize in a radical way that shifts the culture. And Angelo, who again is one of my partners, he always talks about creating a system to challenge the system. That we can't use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. It's never going to happen. We've got to be able to build systems outside of systems. And it's not easy. We all know that. I've been in situations where I believe that certain people were my friends, my real friends. And after seeing me go through things or seeing certain situations, they don't pick up the phone and call. They don't care. They don't want to know because they don't want to be involved. And I get that. But somehow or another, we always come back around because eventually something happens. It's like the ASAP Rocky situation. It's above me. I'm not involved in politics. I don't connect to that. I don't want to know about what's going on in the hood. That's not what I'm involved in. And then bam, something happens and you got the petition out asking everybody to help sign it to get you out of prison, out of jail, and to share it and to help. And so we meet back. We meet in places where there's things that I don't know, where I need to go to people who are in politics, who are in other areas and say, hey, help me to put together a strategy. So it's not for us to be afraid of one another, but it's for us to be able to look at each other and see what the different benefits in different areas are, and then figure out how we can utilize each other. Right. I remember when working at the National Action Network that one of the things we were good for was shaking the pole downstairs, and then Reverend Sharpton would be out there kicking noise, and then someone like a Sylvia Rohn, who was an executive within the music business, other people within corporate spaces would be able to say, look at them outside. If we don't get it together in here, they're going to tear this spot down. They were able to leverage the voice of those who were sort of on the outside. So I proudly take on the outside role. We have started a network. I've transitioned from the Women's March. I'm still a part of it, but I am not a leader of the Women's March anymore in terms of being on the board. And in this transition process, we really sort of looked at the movement and found some of the gaps and areas where we think we can fit in, and no, we don't think we can do it all. There is a need for our legacy organizations and other organizations that do great work. We don't think in any way that we can replace them. It's all of us together. But we've started an organization called Until Freedom. And people should watch out for what we're doing, and again, be able to use us as a tool for making the noise that we need to be made in our society.
And how do we support you, and where?
So, we're still a little infant baby. We're crawling, but you can first of all follow us directly. So you can go to Tamika D. Mallory on any of the platforms and find information about what I'm doing personally, as well as what's happening with the development of Until Freedom. But we have a little Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page, and it's at Until Freedom.
At Until Freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much
Thank
for that,
you.
Tamika.
I have some questions, and then the audience is going to have some questions. And for the sake of time, my first one, I'm going to conflate two questions in one. And this is for
Everybody.
whoever, and anyone can add part to this answer. Yesterday was Suicide Prevention Day, and people were doing all kinds of things to create more awareness around that topic. Sometimes, unless you're a black woman who's in it, we don't realize how many of us are dealing with the trauma that I heard you all discuss. So we're 53% of the workforce of people of color, but we experience, they say, 89% of the workplace-induced trauma. And then we're in church-type communities and civic communities that are still faking the funk about whether mental illness is something that we can discuss in a room. But mama is suffering. And if mama suffers, the whole house suffers, right? So what is it in whatever work you're doing on the front lines, because you all are in front lines of organizations and have been, where can the mama in trouble go? And then for those of us in here who want to be part of organizing, in what way? Now, the numbers for children, for black children committing suicide are higher than ever. That used to not be our thing. Right. You know, if it is a thing, it wasn't our folks. Right. So we are watching these numbers climb, and I'm just asking for myself and for my daughter and for everybody else's mama and daughter, what can be done and by whom?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that we have this session on Saturday called Healing the Wounds of Circumstance. I think we have to look at people, pay attention to them, and when they tell you something is wrong, or they may not be there next time you call, or the language, you've got to learn the language of someone who is depressed or who needs some help, and believe them. I unfortunately have a sister who committed suicide, so I'm very conscious of people who have depression, who are unhappy, and I try to come to them no matter how busy I am. We have to listen to people, hear their language, and hear their pain, and don't just say, oh, there's nothing wrong with her, there's nothing wrong with you, because that's what many of us have a tendency to say, or to say, oh, that person's just crazy, don't pay attention to him or her. No matter who calls my office, I feel an obligation to talk with them, no matter it may be sometimes annoying, but you've got to listen to people. You need to keep a reference list of who is it that can help people. Where do we send them? Because when people call you, sometimes it has been tough for them to call you. You need to have a list of where they can go for the help, and be sure to help them to get there and get that help. And that's why we've started this program called Healing the Wounds of Circumstance. You're going to be hearing a lot more about it. But on Saturday, if anyone has the time, we do have a seminar on that with the doctors who created the program to help us, because almost all of us have been wounded by some circumstance or the other.
And Tiffany, how can we help young people, which is where you're focused on the college campuses? Because as women, I talk to my girlfriends all the time about how we were raised in that toughen up chick, take it, suck it up, deal with it. Because as I said at the beginning, everything's been on the back of a black woman since the beginning of time, but that doesn't mean that it's right, right? So how can we pass down to our daughters, no, you don't have to be a delicate flower, but you don't have to pretend that you're okay when you're not.
Right. Let me say this, and I want you to add to this too, because me and Iffy were just last week in a really important Black Policy Labs, Black Policy Matters, it does matter, Black Policy Labs convening, and there were folks talking about black women in health. But let me just add this. So as someone who is a survivor, and someone who has also lost two friends personally who have taken their own lives in this work, I can't express enough how important and necessary it is for us to practice individually. I'm giving you two individual things you can do. One is to make sure that you are actively listening and following through. It is not enough for you to ask somebody, hey, how you doing? So that you can get to the questions in your agenda for your work. You have to ask folks, how are they actually doing? Because when we show up to spaces, we show up as our full selves.
Yeah.
So if I had a bad breakup, and then the next day I got to be on a panel in front of 100 people, I didn't go through a bad breakup, but I'm just saying, if I had to sit in front of a panel of a bunch of people, I might not be okay. You see what I'm saying? If I reach out to my sister Tamika, and we FaceTime all the time, and I ask her how she's doing, or she asks me how I'm doing, we tell each other the truth. We don't just say, oh girl, this meeting was crazy. We say, no, before we talk about the work, here's what's going on with my family and my parents. I had to travel here and I'm tired, right? Like we have the real check-in. And so it's important for us to actively listen to each other because nobody's gonna love us like we can love ourselves. Right. That's the first thing. So at the NAACP, the first event that I had, which people thought was really wild when I tried to submit the check for it, I submitted an opportunity for us at our first session with leaders, there was 50 leaders we brought from across the country, to have trap yoga. Now that sounds wild, like what trap yoga gonna do? Yeah. But nobody in the room had done yoga.
That's right.
And everybody listens to trap music.
Save
so
your life.
I brought I brought a trained therapist, a trained woman who came, and with a bunch of brothers who ain't never been in these positions before, with a bunch of girls and women and thems who have never, ever, ever done both. We said we need to create the space to remind people that the work is important, but that health is more important to sustain the work. That's the first thing, is that you have to follow through and check in with people and actively listen. The second thing is that piece. If you are in a position, not all of us are, where you are in control of your programs, or you are in control of other workers and their space and their time around HR policies, it is necessary that as much as you think you talk about racial bias and LGBTQ same gender loving bathrooms, you need to just as much include the conversation around how are we taking care of ourselves in the workplace. That people feel not that the workplace is a safe space, because it ain't always gonna be a safe space, but that people feel like there's somebody safe to go to in the workplace in case something happens. That's right. And so in my organization and my team, I don't know about the rest of everybody else, but we've created a space where we can have conversations before we get started to find out where people are actually starting from, and then move and adjust from there. You can't expect people to put on a national conference if somebody's going through something, right? And if you don't know what they're going through, that's not their fault, it's yours. So I need us to follow through and finish those pieces, and the best thing that I'm doing at the NAACP with my team is modeling that for other people.
Yeah.
I don't know what my life would be without you, Tiffany, so I'm glad you're here. And whatever we can do to support. I just wanted to quickly add, because I know you have other questions that you want to touch on. James Baldwin talks a lot about basically the double-mindedness that Black people have to go through, right, just to survive. So I want us to, when our team was tasked with building what is the first municipal focus for any city to focus on, specifically on Black mental health, the reason why we didn't want to call it people of color, right, is because Black people have something very unique about their existence here in this country. There's the mental health that, yes, we can talk about in the psychological aspect of what we experience medically. But then there is the added trauma of normalizing the fact that we are living a subhuman existence every day, and we are the only ones tasked with having to act above that and be normal every day, right? So there is a part of mental health that actually feels very violent for me, because it really, in many ways, it still stigmatizes us as the originators or the causes or the ones that created the mental health trauma that we're experiencing. Right. So part of our advocacy has to really ensure that, number one, in the spaces where it's appropriate, where the data shows we are dealing with things differently, that we are unapologetic about saying Black mental health is different. Yes. And Black mental health is connected to systems that aren't working for us. So if young children have to take 3 hours to get to school, and then they go to school hungry, and then you think their mind is going to operate the same way as somebody else, right? Then the schizophrenia is not on the child, it's on the system. Right. So I think that the problem I have with mental health, as somebody who has family members that are dealing with it medically, but if we're honest with ourselves, all individuals deal with some type of mental health reality, is number one, we have to expand the conversation and normalize the conversation in the spaces that are safer. And I think we need to dare to look at investments and resources differently. Barbers are some of the best psychologists, underfunded psychologists in our communities, right? They speak to any and everybody, right? First of all, because about any and everything. Right? So one of the things that our team is working on is how can we make sure that investments actually go into barber shops so that they are actually the ones that are getting certified to ensure that they can hear and listen to things that may be cues of, mental, despair or so that's number one. Number two, we have to challenge, one of the other strategies that I worked on before I left the city of New York was this project called NYC Men Teach, which is still one of the leading teacher recruitment strategies in the United States. We don't want to challenge the fact that babies don't just get suspended. I don't know what baby you know that just walks in a room called suspension, right? Babies get suspended by teachers. Over 80% of teachers do not look like us. So we are constantly in situations where people who don't have to invest in how we feel are the ones then telling us that we are constantly the originators of the problems in the spaces that we're in. Then we wonder why in the workplace we're not able to advocate well enough for our mental health stability. You feel me? Are we following? So we need to look at mental health as a pipeline issue as to where are the spaces, not just when we see distress, but where are we teaching young people to say, I don't feel good, and the other person says, and I care. Right. Because oftentimes we don't care about each other because we weren't trained to care about each other in that way. It doesn't mean we don't have empathy. We are the most caring people that we know. We take care of other people's people. Black women who were wet nurses were the first psychologists of this country, right? We had to sit there while we were enslaved, but then we had to tell this woman how well their baby was doing as they're literally hanging on our teeth. And then we had to pretend like we weren't going through distress and then make them feel comfortable. That sounds like a shrink. So we are owed some checks, right? So we know how to care, but we have to make sure that systems that aren't invested in housing and projects that still are dilapidated, then air that's killing you, then water that is poisoned, then unions that collective bargaining is being disenfranchised, and that's just Tuesday. So why are we talking about mental health as something that we created for ourselves when we are still asking, especially Black women, to deal with the trauma of just being a Black woman on a day-to-day basis, right? So we have to shift the narrative of what mental health is and recognize that these systems are traumatic. Yeah. And it is a miracle that we're here. And it's a miracle that we look this good, right? But it's a miracle. So I just want to make sure that on the advocacy front, we are also making sure that we really attack the fact that these systems, there's literally no system, unless it's literally Black created, that is not traumatic. Right. So I just want us to really center that as well.
And point well taken. I just want to, we got our 2-minute warning 2 minutes ago, but I want to push us back even further and say this. I was interviewing Dr. Anita Phillips, a clinical psychologist, PhD, and she explained that the trauma of slavery has been encoded into our DNA.
It is.
And that when you add the trauma that you can trace from the ships and add segregation and racism trauma and over-incarceration trauma and single mama trauma and criminal element experiences, trauma to the people of color who we've called Black and Negro and African American and everything but African. When you trace it, it goes as far back as that. So when we're having a reparations conversation, y'all better talk about some mental health and services, right? Because that is, the common denominator is not us, it's what was done to us.
And can I just add very quickly, and very quickly, and not just mental health services, but mental health doctors.
Yes.
Because we're only 5% of the field of psychology. So we actually have to expand who cares about us. I can't have another J. Marion Sims taking care of my body. We have to have people that look like us who can speak to us.
Or at least understand the issues of us well enough to do something about it. I want to thank this fantastic panel of women. Can we just give them a hand? Thank you so much to Iffy Ike, to Tiffany Lawson, to Tamika Mallory, and to Dr. E Faye, who we love, thank you so much for everything that you are, Dr. Williams. We
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
So thank you. We will be. Can everybody hear me? Are we good? Oh, I'm so thankful for everyone who stayed from our last panel, which was fantastic, and I see people coming in. If you want to move on up, ease on down the road. I'm not gonna sing unless it gets real stale, but come on up, you're welcome to do so while I introduce our next panel of very talented women. But before I do that, because this is CBCFALC weekend, I want to honor and recognize the member of Congress who we have with us right now, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Thank you so much for being here. Point of personal privilege, I am from Galveston, Texas, so you are especially welcome to me. Now, for our panel, I have Ms. Wakenya Clanton, who is Senior Advisor for the Chairman of the DNC. Welcome, Wakenya. And we have Ms. L. Williams, Political Strategist and founder of LJW Community Strategies. So we spent a great deal of time in the last session, which I know you all were here and patiently waited through, talking about what it's like to be on the front lines and what's being done on the front lines. And I know that you all have a different perspective in that you know how to put meat on the bones of what it means to add structure and organization and build, because you've done it for yourselves and you do it for big organizations like the DNC. So after you take your few minutes of time each, I would like for you to hone in and focus on how people who are here could become organizers, build infrastructure, start their own organizations, or be more fruitful in the organizations that they're in. So, but first, let's hear about what you're doing, the work you're doing now, and what it's important for us to know.
Thank you so much, Monique, for this opportunity, and thank you so much to the CBCF and all of you beautiful people who are here with us today. At the DNC, we've been really working hard at helping to build and establish the infrastructure that's going to be needed to really take our country back to the place where we can get it on a good foot. I think that's the easiest way to say that. Or actually, no, the better way to say that is to really get, restore faith in the American people, amongst American people. Our leaders have daunting tasks, and it's not easy. The work that they do isn't one that should be taken lightly, but as elected leaders, they have a responsibility, and as an institution, we have a responsibility to people. And I think when we talk about this upcoming election, there could be a lot said about where people are and how they're feeling, and there are feelings of whether or not to engage and who to engage first and all of that, but our country is really facing a time where we have to figure out who we want to be known as.
Sorry, I see our other panelists, so I'm sorry to interrupt you. But did you want, she can come up after, but keep on going. Okay.
Sure. So, we're at a point in time in our country where it really is going to require the best of all of us and a true solid investment, not only of time, but also resources. I think at the DNC, one of the things that we realize is that we can't keep showing up to people at the last minute, particularly Black people, at the last minute, expecting us to just get on the good foot. So I'm so grateful to so many women, L. being one of them, Melanie Campbell, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Clark, those type of women who kind of held us to the fire, and it made way for the work that I do at the DNC. So I have the awesome task of leading our Black women's engagement work. I do that through I'm now approaching a 2-year tour called Seat at the Table, where we go across the country engaging with thousands of Black women around issues that are most important to us. We're preparing to actually award grants to Black women organizers across this country. We've been able to, this past summer, we hired 300 organizers that were strategically placed in major communities across this country.
77% of that class of people that we hired were people of color. And they were based in communities like Detroit, like Milwaukee, Georgia. We have people in Georgia and Florida and other places across the country to make sure we tell the true narrative of why it's so important to put the investments back in the community and make sure we're training a base of people who are doing the work of organizing.
Okay, so how can we support the organization? And if people want to be hands-on involved, is there a way to do that?
Absolutely. So we have a number of programs that are rolling out this fall, coming through this fall, particularly as we approach going back to school. One of our largest programs that we ran last year was our New Blue Crew program, which was a program that was designed and targeted specifically to students on college campuses. We've taken that and also incorporated the organizing core in that. And so that's a great way for younger people to get involved in the process, but also for those of us in this room, particularly the Black women in this room who are interested in engaging in the work that we've been doing at the DNC. We have formed a Seat at the Table ambassadors group, and we engage with them there online. And so we take organizing both on and offline, and we equip Black women with toolboxes that they need to activate around national holidays like National Voter Registration Day and others.
Right. Excellent, excellent. So please, you all take advantage of that and share that with your followers. And I should say, before we hear from Eljoy, if you are in here and you have a phone, please tweet and post on Instagram, and the hashtag is CBCFALC19. Let people know that we are in here, and if there's a takeaway that you had from the last panel you have from this one, please be actively involved in getting the word out there about Agenda for Black Women in 2019.
Good afternoon or early evening, everyone. I went before the panel started. I was going around the room trying to meet folks, the CBCF interns that I've met, some Teach for America teachers that I've met, and like half of them gone now. So I'm glad I got an opportunity to go out and talk to you individually. Before we talk or focus the conversation, even though my sis here talked about particularly what the Democratic Party is doing this time, I want to dial it back a bit. All right, because one of the things who I am is a teacher, and a civics teacher at that. So before you understand whether or not you are a Republican, whether or not you are a Democrat, you have to understand what your political values are. Particularly because we're in a time where a lot of people are blowing smoke up Black women's skirts. Or pantsuits. Right? Oh, the power of Black women, and you know Black women do all of this, and you ain't, you don't have anything unless you got Black women on your team, and Black women gonna save us. Black women, when you gonna tell us to vote? Black women, like everybody, right? Like we all magic and doing everything for everybody and saving the country. And as the previous panel talked about, we still have the things in our community and in our personal lives still falling apart. That means at this time when the country is falling apart, right? While we're putting on the mask to save ourselves, we also have to identify who we are and what your values and what your political value is. Politics is about power. And once you have the power, what are we then using it for? It's nice to talk about Black women's growing political power and giving us all awards and doing commercials and ads, right? But that's not engagement. Doing ads celebrating our political power, celebrating the work that we do without a transfer of power for us to be able to prioritize what issues our communities care about, without us being able to prioritize the dollars that our communities need from state budgets, from federal budgets, from city budgets, from the school board budget, right? So engagement means that you then have the power and the understanding to be able to control things in your community and support things in community on your own, not someone doing it on your behalf. So we have to be careful in this space, that while people are throwing out the platitudes and the thank yous and doing the card and things of that nature, that it also comes with a commitment to actually engage and invest in the things that we say are important in our community. So before we even categorize that as Democrat, before we even categorize that as Republican, we are categorizing this as these are issues that our community need, whether it's education, whether it's increased funding on our infrastructure, whether it's investing in businesses and the economy, right? We care about the same things. Black Women's Roundtable and others just recently did a report talking about the issues that Black women are focused on. And you see it in the news where people will talk about, Black women going out and getting degrees, advanced degrees, right? You don't.
Most degrees.
Listen, I have girlfriends now who just finished a master's and they talk about, maybe I should go back and get a PhD, right? Black women, fastest group starting businesses in our communities are Black women. What do we then need in order for that to translate into actually lifting up and building infrastructure in our communities? So with our increased degrees, with the increased businesses, with the increasing amount of us in C-suites, with the increasing amount of us leading national organizations, that also means that we should be increasing our power and our leverage, and one way to do that is with political power. And then holding people accountable, and then also supporting those who are in office as well. We do a lot about and talk a lot about holding elected officials accountable, and everybody wants to rally outside, their offices and tell them what they ain't doing and tweet at them. But then you have Congressional Black Caucus members who may be in the room by themselves, may be in a committee hearing by themselves, and you'll go out and protest white elected officials who ain't doing nothing, ain't coming to your meeting, ain't even say your name or your community's name, but won't go to the hearing and won't support the members and the congressional members who are and walk into that room every day with their communities and their families and their people on their backs. So one of the things I tell people on my show is that you have to communicate with those who represent you, whether they do good or whether they do bad.
Right.
Because how is somebody supposed to represent you if you never talk to them? If he hired you somebody's lawyer, if you never talk to them about the case? How can you talk to them about what your communities need, what your children need in schools? How do they know if you never say anything? We have to use that collective, that rising political power that, by the way, didn't just start with the election of Barack Obama. So don't let nobody tell you that. Black women's political power have been increasing way before he even decided.
Well, it's been in existence since the beginning of time. When you think about just how we always show up, our participation cannot be disputed on any level.
And to give you a point to that, there's this story I tell often. When did women gain the right to vote?
99 years ago.
1920.
1920 with the passage of? 19th Amendment. Thank you, class. Passage of 19th Amendment. Most people are under the impression, and they say collectively, that Black women wouldn't have that right until after the Voting Rights Act. Right? But before voter suppression laws were put in place in some of these states, Black women did register and engage and vote. And I tell this story all the time. It's in the Crisis magazine for January of 1921, where W.E.B. Du Bois is talking about, it's the first election that Black women had the opportunity to register to vote. And during that election, in some places, Florida, Louisiana, to name two specifically, Black women outnumbered white women who were registered to vote in some counties. Even though they had to, in some instances, wait till every eligible white woman was registered to vote. It was Black women who stood online, stood outside a courthouse, or stood next to a municipal building and provided, some of you who may have worked campaign lines before, you bring food to people waiting on the line so they don't move to go vote. That's what Black women did so that they can at least register and vote in their first presidential election. So our power, our political power, is has only been growing, but is beyond the vote. And we have to talk about how do we use that political power? How do we use the political momentum, not just to get thank you cards and thank you ads, but to actually transform our communities and focus on our children, our communities, our infrastructure, and our whole selves.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. How can people support you? Where can they find you? I've asked, and nobody just goes ahead and does it. I have to ask. Okay.
Okay, I'm on all of the socials at L. Joy Williams. And then I also host a show called Sunday Civics, which airs on SiriusXM Urban View, Sundays at 10 a.m., where I teach civics, teach political engagement and political empowerment. Everybody listens to, conversations, and I don't know if any nerds still watch C-SPAN like I do, but, and you hear these talking points and these issues, but not really understanding sometimes what they mean. And sometimes they change. What's progressive now wasn't, progressive 10, not even 2 years ago, right? And so you can listen to the show at Sunday Civics or sundaycivics.org or on SiriusXM.
All right, so I have my question. You were talking about our power. A lot of us don't know what that means and what we have. So if I were to say by 2060, women of color are going to be...
Wait, women of color, you saying black?
Or black women.
I'm about to clarify.
Okay.
Women of color are going to be in the majority.
Okay.
And of that, black women, and whatever way you describe African American, Negro colored, us, will be almost half of that number. Now, that's a huge block, not just for voting. I mean, that's money, that's power. What is it that I can say to my 13-year-old that will let her know what she should be doing from here to there, so that by the time she's 50, she's standing fully in what it means to be in that huge, powerful group?
I think it's important to note that just because numerically we are in the majority doesn't necessarily mean that you can retain the power. And that's important to note, particularly as we are in this point where you see all of this turmoil that's happening now, is because people understand that those demographic shifts that are about to happen.
Yes.
And so if you can, shift and change, if you can do voter suppression, if you can do change laws that will maintain the power of a few, because you see this demographic shift that's about to change. So I would say, to tell your 13-year-old, I would say encourage them and educate them now before the vote, right, about their political power now, so that they are aware of the tricks of people trying to take their power before they're ever fully able to walk in it. The other thing I would say, and this is important for our communities, because even if we're talking about policy change, we're talking about voter suppression, we're talking about putting laws on the books that are not restrictive but actually empower people. Even one of the other hats I wear is I'm president of Brooklyn NAACP back in New York. And I always tell my membership, what we are doing, we are not asking someone for a favor. We are demanding what we're entitled to.
That's right.
That's a different mindset. If I ask you to borrow $5,000, the way I come to you with that question is I walk to you differently. My positioning is different. I'm humbling myself to ask you to maybe, if you can find it in your heart, to help me with $5,000. And I'm also describing to you why I need it. I'm describing to you what I would do with it. I have to provide all of this stuff because I'm asking you for a favor.
Right.
But if you owe me $5,000.
Give me my $5,000. Yeah, that's a demand.
Right? If you owe me $5,000, I'm not coming in a humble, bowed position. I'm like, where my money at?
Give my money. Give my money.
Right? It's a different positioning, even of your body. You stand like your body, your shoulders are squared because you know you deserve it. So there is no, because if you can give me the money that you owe me because I gotta pay my rent. I don't need to explain. You owe me $5,000. Give me my money. Whether I use it to go to the spa or not, it's still owed to me.
And it's mine.
And I don't have to tell you what I need to do with it. Right. And that mind shift is what we have to do in our communities with our young people, with our communities, because then when you're talking about the radical work of talking about the lack of accountability in law enforcement, when you're doing the radical work of being in hearings and talking about legislation to actually change the structure of our healthcare, change the structure of education that actually benefits and empowers our communities, you stand different. Because now you're not asking someone for a favor, you are asking for what is owed to you.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. We are at our 2-minute warning, but I want to give the last question to Kenya. I do battle sometimes on Twitterverse about the importance of political engagement for people who believe that there is nothing there for them. Nothing, all of the things you just listed, they would have no idea about that. But then we end up in a position like we are now, and I'm getting so many, so that thing where if I had just, but what can we do to talk to the completely disengaged person about why it is important, not just for these huge ones, not for a presidential election, but if you elect your dog catcher, I need you to show up at the council hall and try to understand why it's important for you to be a part of that process for you and your children. What vehicles do we have to get the word out?
The main one is conversation. Like everything in our community is passed through conversation, is word of mouth. We often assume that people, they're disengaged because they don't want to do something. They just don't understand it. And the language that we tend to use when we're talking to people about why it's important to engage in voting or civic responsibility sometimes goes completely over their heads.
Right.
We discount the fact that most members of our community are juggling. Yeah. I'm not just talking about work. I'm talking about family. I'm talking about life. I'm talking about crises. That's right. That may not necessarily be personal in the sense that it's happening in their household, but it's happening next door to them, or it's happening on their way to work. And we discount all of those factors. And so when it's time for people to really take, I guess, a complete interest in something, it doesn't become important because you think it ought to be important. You have to connect the dots. We have to connect the dots for folks. And so one of the main things that I try to center in my work at the DNC is exactly that. How we are talking about issues that impact people. And I let people inform me, right? So when we go into these communities, we're having these conversations. Those conversations are built around what people have already said to us is important to them. So we bring in the experts, we bring in the political leaders, and all those folks who can help connect the dots and give them, and pardon my pun, a seat at the table with these folks because they didn't even know that they existed. So most of the time it's about connecting people to resources and allowing them to be informed about why the decisions that they need to make are important. So, and I try to make sure that we've adopted it across all of our constituency work, not just the work that I do with Black women, but also what we do with Latinx community and what we do with the Muslim community and what we do with youth community, because organizing is cultural. It has to be something that is done in culture and in language so people can understand it. So taking it outside of 430 South Capitol is so important because people don't get a chance to see us. They need to touch us and know that we're real. They need to see us and know that we know that they are real and that their issues aren't. I'm not going into anyone's community telling them what they should care about because I don't live there every day.
That's right.
You know, and so what is most important for me is to know what they care about and why we have failed them and how we can fix that. Because if we keep coming to them with the same, you know, oh, you got to come vote on this day because, you know, if you want that pothole fixed, that may not even be their most important issue. They may be struggling with failing piping systems or, you know, school closures or anything. Child care is a big issue in our community. And oftentimes I'm talking about all the black people in this room, make assumptions about other black people who aren't engaged because we don't live their circumstances.
That's right.
We have afforded ourselves, we put ourselves out of touch with our own communities. And that is one thing that I have vowed never to do. I don't care how far I go in life, the people that live in Canton, Mississippi will always be centered in the work that I do. That's how I remain connected to the community. And that's what I encourage other folks to do as well.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you to both of our gifted panelists, to Ms. Eljoy Williams, to Wakenya Clanton. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Woo, I'm so happy. My work is almost done. But before I finish, I want to honor and recognize one of the 3 co-chairs of the Congressional Caucus for Black Women and Girls, and who's responsible for us having this excellent conversation today, and that is Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. Can you welcome her, please? Thank you so much. Oh, no, you're fine. Thanks.
I'm going to take this opportunity as 2 women to join me here on stage. Congresswoman Patrice Walker.
Oh, okay.
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. It's certainly my honor and my privilege to come. Let me first of all just say to please pardon my tardiness today. We just finished voting on the floor of the House. We just finished voting on the floor of the House. So the best of, please have a seat, y'all. The best of all intentions always get messed up by the Speaker of the House because, you know, they set the calendar. But it's really my honor, my privilege to have you all here for the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project. As has been stated, I'm Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and I proudly represent the 9th Congressional District of New York, which is Central Brooklyn. Brooklyn's in the house. We're always in the house. My colleagues, I want to, first of all, extend again regrets for my co-chairs, both Robin Kelly and Bonnie Watson Coleman, but because of the shift in time, they too had other obligations. And so we're all splitting shifts and locations in order to make sure that we all meet our obligations. But I could not miss this opportunity to be here as a proud co-chair of not only the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls, but under the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, the proud chair of the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the women who came in and really gave us the information that we needed to hear to mobilize and to organize. And I want to thank Eljoy Williams, who was just seated here on the panel. I want to thank Ife. I know that you had a lot to say. Did you present already? All right, I just want to make sure. And who else am I missing? And Tamika Mallory, who I understand was here with you as well. The Sojourner Truth Legacy Project was founded in 2008 under the leadership of former Congresswoman and Chairwoman Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick of Detroit, Michigan. I reaffirm our shared value, our shared vision and commitment to bringing together Black women across generations to address issues such as employment and entrepreneurship, healthcare, and the advancement of women in business and government. The Sojourner Truth Legacy Project aims to build a network of African American and multicultural women committed to harnessing our power around issues that are crucial to our livelihood, our communities, and our families. This year, we're acknowledging 400 years of the African American resilience, which would not have been possible without the contributions of Black women. I had the distinct honor and privilege of traveling with the Congressional Black Caucus delegation led by Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Ghana in the year of return, and I wish I could transport, I wish I was Jeannie. Y'all know about Jeannie? Yes, Google it if you don't, because I don't want to assume anything. But I wish I was Jeannie. Jeannie had the ability to blink and make anything happen. If I could blink, I would take you all to Ghana. because that experience is an eye-opening, empowering experience. Anything that you have read, anything that you have seen historically presented, it pales in comparison to actually physically being in Ghana, in the dungeons, where Africans were held before they were held after being kidnapped and brutalized and sent into the Western Hemisphere as enslaved Africans. So I wish I could make sure that you all have that experience, because then you will know who you truly are. One of the t-shirts of one of our guides read, "We are our ancestors' wildest dreams." Think about that. You're brutalized, you're stripped away from everything you know. You don't know whether you're going to live or you'll die. You're sick. Your heart is broken. You're being treated subhuman. You don't know what the next day will bring. Can you imagine? We are seated here in this convention center because there were a number of members of the Congressional Black Caucus who saw it not robbery to establish a foundation. Our ancestors could never have dreamed that this would be their legacy, that we would be their legacy. So let us keep that in mind. Representation matters. Diversity matters. Inclusion and input matters. And we don't need diversity for diversity's sake. We know that when people of different backgrounds, people of different walks of life, with different experiences and points of view, are seated in the boardrooms and at the table, that's how change actually happens. It's important for Black women to be visible in every space. Little Black girls are looking to us to show them what's possible. The question was just posed by our moderator. What do we tell our young girls so that they're ready for leadership in the next generation? And I say, we don't tell them, we show them. Them little girls should be in this room right now. I was in the room when my mother was organizing. I was in the room when parents were organizing to make sure that Black children would be well educated. I was in the room when Black women were fighting to get daycare services. I was in the room when women were fighting to make sure that they could have affordable housing for their families. Bring the children in the room so they can feel and understand what it is to liberate yourself. That's where the power comes from. And that's what Sojourner Truth taught us. So I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, but I wanted to use this opportunity because there is a bad sister on Capitol Hill, a super bad sister on Capitol Hill. And one of the things that we do through the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project is that we honor a champion amongst us. It is called the Women of Truth Award. And this year, we are awarding one of our luminaries. This sister I met when I first came to Congress. I had heard so much about her. Of course, we all witnessed her work, whether it's her outspokenness, her boldness, her standing in the face of adversity and triumphing. It is the Honorable Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Woo! Yes, 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 absolutely. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, each year we typically host a reception that celebrates Black women leaders, and during that reception we recognize a woman who embodies the character, spirit, and conviction of Sojourner Truth. And this year, it is the Honorable Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Houston, Texas. Congresswoman Lee, the reception is going to be held tomorrow, but guess what's happening tomorrow in Houston? Right. Presidential debate. The best of plans can always be foiled. Yeah. In her district, exactly. So Congresswoman Jackson Lee began blazing trails for women of all racial and ethnic backgrounds the day she enrolled at Yale University as part of their first class to include women. Mm-hmm. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, real.
She went on to obtain a law degree, and she was eventually elected to represent the people of the 18th Congressional District of Texas, which she has done faithfully and forcefully for the past 24 years. Throughout her near quarter-century tenure, difficult and defining moments in this country have been met with Congresswoman Jackson Lee's sound and inimitable leadership. Her trailblazing days aren't over yet. In this, the 116th Congress, she has become the first woman to chair the Judiciary Subcommittee for Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security, and Investigation. And while she was breaking the glass ceiling for women and leading legislative strategies for everything from foreign relations to reparations, hello somebody, Congresswoman Jackson Lee also served as a fierce advocate for a global Black agenda as chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's board, a position she held until earlier this year when she passed the torch on to another fearless leader, Congressman Cedric Richmond. Congresswoman Jackson Lee's life work is encapsulated in her unfailing willingness to step up and answer the call to leadership. She doesn't just step up, she walks in leadership. She was born in leadership, and she continues to exude that wherever she goes. She wears a royal crown, and we all know that this sister is super bad. This week provides a perfect example. While we would love to have Congresswoman Jackson Lee with us tomorrow to celebrate the legacy of Black women leadership, she is needed in her district where presidential candidates will be discussing their policy positions on issues of grave importance to our communities. Because she has answered the call to be there in the trenches of the democracy in action, she unfortunately will not be here with us tomorrow evening. But while we have her with us today, it is my honor to present the 2019 Women of Truth Award to the Honorable Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Houston, Texas. I got it. Come on, y'all, give it up for Sheila Jackson Lee. Looking just as regal.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so very much. Taking pictures.
That better? Come on, y'all. Absolutely.
Melanie, give someone your phone.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Awesome. I'll hold on to it for you, Sheila. Would you give us a few words of wisdom?
I will. Just a few words. I am so honored and so humbled as well to be able to accept this, and so chagrined that I will not be here tomorrow. Things happen, don't they?
Yeah.
But they happen for a reason, for the season. We know that when we're celebrating Christmas and all the people of faith say,
Amen.
what is the reason for the season? But I am particularly honored to have given birth to the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project. And the reason why I say that, because the little lady called Sojourner Truth, and I certainly do not do that with any disrespect, was the first recognized statute to be placed in the halls of the United States Congress. We did that with the late C. Dolores Tucker, and her predecessor or her successor, Ife Williams, was one of your panelists.
That's right.
And all of the funding to sponsor this statute was funded by African American women and their solicitations, and the sculptress was an African American woman. But it didn't just get placed there. We were rebuffed and refuted and denied for at least a decade to be able to put this abolitionist, this suffragette, in the halls of the United States Congress. When I first came, the suffragettes themselves were in the basement, and it was a few of us women who said, shameful. But the only statute reflected white women and did not take into consideration that Sojourner Truth was an abolitionist and a suffragette. What? She went around talking about the empowerment of women. We wrote the legislation. It ultimately was passed in the waning hours, or the beginning hours, if you will, of the Congress right before the ascending to office of President Barack Obama. It was signed, I guess forcefully signed, and the big celebration was in 2009. Out of that, our chairwoman at that time was inspired, and a wonderful young congresswoman, still young, from Brooklyn, New York, the Brooklyn, was there to not only participate, but to take on the ownership of the idea of what Sojourner was all about, and that is truth. And so if my words to those of you who are here, and I hope they will ring clear tomorrow evening. Thank you, Joy. Thank you to all of the panelists that have presented themselves, and Wakenia and Sister Mallory, and all of those who have come, and my sister Assemblywoman, and my sister Melanie. I am delighted to work with Congresswoman Yvette Clarke because she exudes grace and power. And I would say to you that if you hear any of my words, it is that there is power in this room. There are instructions that we should adhere to, some that Joy has given us. But there is power in the African American woman. And I think informed power is more powerful. Energized power, present power. Because those of us who are in the room and have a seat at the table must be prepared to fight for those who cannot speak for themselves. That is what I take into every meeting room. And I want you to know, speaking as a member of the United States Congress, there are meeting rooms that we are in that we are the only person of color in that room, even in 2019. And it behooves us to reflect and to speak to issues that sisters and brothers cannot speak to. So taking this award that captures the word truth, further energizes me for the message and the journey ahead. This is a Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I had a wonderful time chairing the board for the last 2 years. Delighted to have served on the board for any number of years. This is a vital arm of the CBC, and it is out of this came the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project that would go across the country and tap on the shoulders of young women, middle-aged women, older women, intergenerational, the intersectionalism of getting us together. And let me close with these words, for you to be well in tune with the sisters who have gone on, Maya Angelou, Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan, and many that I am leaving out. But our work is far from being done. That is why that I have introduced being designated by the Honorable John Conyers as he retired to carry forth H.R. 40, the Commission to Study Reparations. I need a tsunami of powerful movement. I need an understanding of what it is. I need no one to have a daunted look or a turn away look or we'll never get that. As my sister said, there was barely a dry eye as we went to the door of no return. For some reason, in the 400 years, I've been many times, For some reason, the Ghanaians took us to another level and pierced into our heart the brutality of that experience. Most of us they went to this castle and they got on a boat. They walked them for hundreds of miles from the inner continent to weaken them so that they would not have any stomach or fight to fight back. So they didn't just pick them up a few feet away. They walked them and did not feed them. And then in the brutality of that slave castle, that dungeon that is now called, women would be raped repeatedly and men brutalized. And those who did not want to subject themselves were brutalized as well as women. There was not a dry eye. I sobbed uncontrollably to learn that we are living in difficult times, but do we ever stop for a moment to pay homage and to be able to say, I am here, I am, because, and that in tribute to our ancestors, we're on the Energy and Commerce Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, and our commitment is, and the Education Committee, and the Appropriations Committee, and our commitment is not to be selfish, because we are Americans on this day of 9/11, but to be able to say that I just can't imagine my ancestors having been enslaved Africans and lived as unpaid workers for a quarter of a century and beyond, 250 years rather, and beyond, that we don't owe them the greatest tribute to cancel out a black woman's struggle for child care, to cancel out someone who can't go to college because of lack of money, to cancel out mass incarceration, to cancel out stopping me from going to vote, for canceling out getting people elected that we wonder how did they get elected and they're not representing us. Cancel it out in 2020. Cancel it out. Stop it out. Stomp it out in their name. That is what your challenge is. So I thank you so very much. I could pointedly tell you what else you could do, but I'm going to give it to you in love. Take these feet and get to stomping and get to walking. And I know we do a lot of marching and walking, but you need to be stomping. Stomp our way to victory in 2020. Don't let one more mother decide that she can't go to work or can't get a job because she can't get child care, because she can't stay home. Not one more person lacking food and one more person have to drop out of college in the name of our ancestors. I thank you, Congresswoman, for honoring me, and I thank you for associating me with truth, for all of you are truth sayers as well. Thank you, and as they say, power to the people.
Yes.
Power to the people. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Sheila. You see what I'm talking about? Woman of truth. Let's give another round to our honorable Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And you see she's rocking the kente.
It's my kente cloth. It is documented. I didn't even bother. There it is. Supreme kente. Okay.
She got the supreme kente. Wow, this is what Sojourner Truth is all about. Before I'd like to make sure that you hear from these two women, because the power that they possess, mobilizing, organizing, is critical to rounding out what you've heard today. It's my honor at this time to ask, I'm going to ask Melanie to say a few words to you about the work that she is doing, how we can all engage, and then I'm going to ask Assemblywoman Latrice Walker of the 55th Assembly District in Brooklyn, New York, to close us out.
Thank you, Congresswoman Clark. Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, everyone that's here. I'm going to be really, really brief. I'm traumatized at what I read right before I came up here. And that is that the current president is turning our people away from the Bahamas. So we got to go more than stomp. We got to turn some stuff out because we built this place. And so it's letting us know if we don't know what's at stake. And I want you to understand, they're not going to let them in and they don't have nowhere to go. But we built this place. And so my concern is that we got to figure out how to get in the streets and do something about it. I can't even think about 2020 because right now our people are dying. Barbara Perkins came by earlier, and we all know Barbara Perkins, and let us know some of her relatives didn't make it out. So we've got a lot of work to do. National Coalition, Black Women's Roundtable, we just want to roll our sleeves up with you all. We really have to, Black women and brothers, we influence you all. So we're speaking to you too. We have to turn out like we really believe that this country is a country we built. Yes, ma'am.
We will work with you. We have been talking about this all week long in the Bahamas.
Yes.
Because we've been on the phone dealing with Coast Guard and others and looking at what kind of monies. And that was not how it started out. And even the people of the Bahamas were representing how wonderful the United States was. In those early days, the Coast Guard did a stupendous job. It was a weekend when the color of despotism and wrong-headedness, and I'm in public company, so came out by categorizing these people in the names that they are. We're dealing with that, suggesting that who they were, charging them. So there is effort to deal with the visas.
Right.
We want to do temporary protective status.
Yes.
And we also need to talk about an appropriation. The CBC is working, but we will work with anyone. We're outraged. We're apologetic. This is not the United States. These individuals are in desperate situation, and they are, Melanie is right, they are connected.
That's right.
Because the loyalists took us, enslaved Africans, from the United States when they left and went to the Bahamas. So they're our cousins and various other friends.
It's our family.
Besides the fact that the Bahamian people have been close to us, 20 minutes from Florida.
That's right.
I had to interrupt because I've been
Right.
Yes.
appalled, and so whatever you choose.
Right. Well, we need to huddle. That's a state of emergency in a whole nother level. 18 feet of water.
Yes.
Imagine it. So you're going to go back home to what? So I always believe that folks will see how much you will take, right? And let me just, because we're nonpartisan, and I am too. Bottom line is we have to get out here, and we can't wait to 2020 to do what we need to do. We have to get out here. We got to figure out how to fight this. We need to work alongside of the Congressional Black Caucus fronts by whatever way we need to do to really address this issue, because it is now, that's a 2020 issue. You all remember Katrina?
Absolutely.
Remember Katrina? That's like 1,000 times over on our watch. And Susan Taylor says, not on our watch. And that's all I want to say. We're ready to roll up our sleeves. I'm ready for the fight. Let's get this done.
And
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Let me say this, Melanie. You said you wanted to. I have on. You want to follow the lead of the Congressional Black Caucus, but it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yes.
The Congressional Black Caucus will follow the lead of the people.
Yes.
And so we need to get on our social media. We need to blow this thing up. We cannot accept that this country that we built, that we vote in, that we pay taxes in, would be so cruel as to not accept individuals who are seeking refuge. We know it's already, we've got folk on our border who are being treated very inhumane, and it harkens me back to the whole Ghanaian being in Ghana. It wasn't, involuntary servitude, but it's the same spirit that creates cages that separates children from their parents, and now would deny entry of these individuals who are seeking refuge, and many of whom have relatives here in the United States, temporary protected status. So let us do our part. I want to thank you, sister, Melanie Campbell for your leadership and your advocacy, and we will follow you or you will follow us, but we're going to get in these streets over this. So thank you so much, Sister Melanie.
Thank you.
I guess I'm probably one of the most privileged people I know right now to be able to follow such dynamic women. Many people know this because I proudly wear it on my sleeve, but I was a staffer to Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. And particularly when the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project first came to fruition, I was lucky enough to be a little girl in the room. And watching and having the ability to grow from all that I've learned and all that I've witnessed gave me the unmitigated audacity to think that one day I too could run for office, right? And so we've heard a lot here this evening. We've heard from advocates and people who are community activists, who are running organizations that most of the time we've only read about in our textbooks. But we got to see and witness these sisters talk about their struggles and talk about what they've gone through. We've got to see greatness from so many, from congressional members, and for women who are not necessarily the power brokers, but the power makers. But what is it that we're gonna do with that? There's so many of us who are sitting in the room who may be PTA members who are saying enough is enough with respect to the lack of education our children are receiving. There's so many women who sit on the pews each and every day who are making just enough money to be broke. And all of those women are looking for the opportunity to look and witness and see this level of greatness to be able to say that I too can run for office. And most women have to be told 7 times that you should run for office before you finally believe it in yourself. In fact, there are so many women who have a hard time believing that they too can do it unless they are validated by someone else who tell them each and every time they think about it that you're not ready, that you're too young, that you need to pay your dues. And most of the time you're hearing this from white men. And so if that woman who's sitting in this audience is you, I implore you to take the initiative, to take that step of faith, to not only be here to witness greatness, but of course to be a part of the lawmaking magnificence of government. We heard that we are the legacy of our ancestors. And what is it that we're gonna do with all of that royalty, all of that richness that is in our DNA? But there are 2 things also that I want to leave you with is that there was just recently a study that was conducted that mentions that our black men, our brothers, our fathers, our spouses, our baby fathers have voted 22% less in these most recent elections than had been in 2008. And we want to make sure that the same level of prowess and respect and dignity that's given to the black women vote is given to our black men as well. We have something very important that's coming upon us very soon. We will be receiving notices in the mail in March with respect to the census. We will not have all of this legislative awesomeness if we don't show up and be a voice in this upcoming census, because we know that these are the building blocks of the districts that all of these women represent. So it is our duty, it is our cause, it is our mission to participate in every way possible, even if it's as simple as filling out the census form once you receive it, come April 1st of 2020. So since I have the wonderful obligation of closing us out, and I'm a little girl who grew up in church, let me start by saying, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent, one from another. In Jesus' awesome, magnificent, and matchless name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next year for the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project 2020. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.